The Canon R6 is one of Canon's most sold cameras for a good reason. It does all the things that the people want: full frame, 4K 60, great autofocus, and has a great price point. Now the Canon R6 Mark II comes in and claims that it improves all the things that the Canon R6 Mark I was lacking. So now let's see how the camera performs to each other and if it's really worth upgrading to the R6 Mark II. Coming up. Hi guys, my name is Paul, I'm a German-based cinematographer, and this channel is all about filmmaking gear reviews such as this one or DaVinci Resolve tutorials. So if you're interested in that, please subscribe and support the channel, I really appreciate that. So thanks Canon Germany for loaning me the Canon EOS R6 Mark II, really had a great time with it. Please note that this camera is a pre-production model, and also what I'm talking about in this video is a comparison to the R6 Mark I, which I own and use from time to time. So everything that is much more specific to the R6 Mark II I will answer in the detailed review, which I'm gonna put out. So if you're gonna interested in that, subscribe to the channel so that you get notified. So the biggest request was overheating, because as we all know, the Canon R6 overheats either in 4K 25 frames per second or 4K 60 frames. So I plugged in a dummy battery into the R6 Mark II and kept recording in 4K 24 frames per second, and after 4 hours I couldn't get it to overheat. So I was recording here at room temperature, it was like 22, 23 degrees, something like that, and the camera won't overheat. Also in Full HD, also don't overheat. And 4K 60, if you turn it on into the menu, the camera says that it eventually can shut off itself due to rising temperature. I was continuously recording for 42 minutes before the camera shut off under the same conditions. Then I waited 1 minute and I could record again 5 minutes. So I don't know about you, but I don't record continuously 4K 60. So it's safe to say that overheating is much more under control on the R6 Mark II. So great improvement here. Now let's talk quickly about battery life, and on the R6 Mark II you gain around like 20 minutes extra when using Canon's official batteries. We are using still the LP6 batteries, and I got with 4K 60 recording just over 2 hours, which I think is really great. So in the normal world, when you record like in 4K 24, something like that, you could get even more. So I think the battery life when using the official Canon batteries is really great, and just like 20 minutes better as on the R6. But now let's talk about the physics and the ergonomics. So also Canon did change a couple of things here, which I personally really like. What I really like is that they moved the on and off switch to the right side, and also now on the left side where the on and off switch used to be, now they have a physical switch to toggle between video and photo as you have on the R5C, but rather than that you have still the same photo menu, and it is an instant switch, so you don't have two different softwares inside. It's just much better for switching between photo and video. What I don't like is that we still have the stupid micro HDMI port. All over the buttons kept the same, so the ergonomics have been great. Also we have the two SD card slots on the side, and also same screen, everything like that. Just the on and off switch is now on the other side, but I think that's something we can get used to. Also from the menu and software wise, Canon spiced it up a little bit. On the R6 Mark II you can now activate false color, which really enables you quickly to judge exposure. But the thing is, there's one caveat, as always, kind of with Canon. You can only activate it when you turn off the viewing assist, so the LUT from Canon Log 3, and you turn off focus peaking when using manual lenses. Otherwise it won't work. So in a normal situation you had to go in a menu, toggle off the viewing assist, and then toggle off when using a cinema lens like peaking, and then toggle on yeah, false color. I also wish that it could be added to the quick menu. So we also have like the quick menu, which we have like in the cinema cameras, which is great, and also the normal quick menu. But I would really wish that Canon can fix that, and I believe that it's fixable via firmware. So I'm looking at you, Canon, please fix that. So otherwise we get like a red outline when recording, which is quite nice. We also get an anti-flicker setting. So if you're in a situation where there's a lot of flicker, you can really specifically dial in the shutter, which is really great under these scenarios. We have pre-recording, which is also great. And we also have focus breathing compensation, which works with most of the RF lenses. So as Sony did, so that's really glad that we have that. And the camera can output RAW over HDMI, but more on that and how that performs in my upcoming Canon R6 Mark II review. So subscribe. Okay, now let's talk about rolling shutter. So the Canon R6 wasn't bad, I think, in rolling shutter, but you can clearly see an improvement on the R6 Mark II. So we have less of the jello-y effect. So I think that's also a great improvement here on rolling shutter with the R6 Mark II. Now let's talk about lowlights, since both cameras are using a full frame sensor. I was curious to see if the Canon R6 does do any better. And the short answer is both do great. And as I've said in my R6 review, you can use the camera up to ISO 12800, which is the same for the R6 Mark II. So no changes there. I think the low light performance is great. I don't find myself bumping up the ISO to 25600. So I'm most of the time way below that. So I think that's a great, yeah, it's still great, but it's still not as good as for the current Sony cameras, for example. I also tested IBIS because also Canon claims that the IBIS got better. And from my test, when I was walking smoothly with the cameras, I didn't see any big improvement there. So it looks like the IBIS is more aggressive, I can say. But overall, when walking, the shots are kind of the same. And if you're doing like handheld movements like panning, it certainly will do a great job. So next up is autofocus. Canon is known for that it has a great autofocus, and overall I've tested both of them in a pretty harsh lighting condition with a lot of backlight, and both of them did really great. I think the Canon R6 Mark I was a little bit more sticky to the eye and could recognize it even better. And it also has more software-wise features for tracking, such as animals, cars, and all that kind of stuff. So, and also Canon has improved the engine here. But overall, I got from my test similar results. But I believe that the R6 Mark II is a little bit better, even though on the R6 the autofocus is already great. So now let's maybe talk about the most important thing, which is image quality. And a lot of people were reporting when getting the R6 that it has a really warm color tint to it, other than any other Canon cameras. So Canon already fixed it in a firmware update a couple months ago, and looking at the shots side by side with both of these cameras using the exact same setting, exact same lens, also no fitted for, also no color shift, something like that, the image looks about the same. I always recorded in Canon Log 3 and just used the color space transform in post, so no extra stuff added there. And the only thing that I kept seeing every time is that the Canon R6 Mark II has a little bit more saturation than the R6, but other than that, how the colors look like is the same. So we still get the great Canon colors on both of these cameras. Both cameras also can record up to 4K 60, and that looks great on both cameras. So only issue is that the R6 will last you longer when recording continuously, so when you're looking for overheating, something like that, but both of them look great. But slow motion, we have a new feature here. So the Canon R6 Mark II does full HD to 180 frames per second, whereas the Canon R6 Mark I does 120 frames per second in full HD. Personally, I didn't use it too much, to be honest, and I've tested them a bunch here, and To be honest, both of them look noisy in this situation, but with a little bit noise reduction in Resolve, you can really look it great. And the extra 50 frames that you get on the R6 Mark II really come in handy, so the slow motion effect even that gets more emphasized. So second most requested thing is dynamic range, and both cameras can record in Canon Log 3. Canon Log 2 obviously has more dynamic range, much more in the shadows. In the highlights is, from my experience, about the same. So when shooting outside, I couldn't see any difference. Also, when in a contrasty situation, both cameras did pretty well. So I did an over and underexposure test here to test really the latitude inside. So I exposed for middle gray and then stopped down the lens or up each at a time to get 5 stops under and 5 stops over. So when overexposing both cameras, I think you can use them to 2 to 3 stops overexposure. Over that, you can't really recover the skin, and they both clip on the same side. So an overexposure, I didn't see any difference there. But when I did the underexposure test, I think both cameras can be used to 3 stops under exposure, which is actually really great. But on the Canon R6 Mark II, I was able to recover the 4th shot. I think you get really a ton of noise in both cameras at the time, but the Canon EOS R6 Mark II holds color really better. So when further underexposing, the Canon R6 Mark I really gets more desaturated and has more color issues, whereas the Canon R6 really holds the color well. So I applied a little bit of noise reduction in Resolve and a little bit of sharpening, and the image was usable, which I'm really surprised. So I think I will argue that the dynamic range is maybe quarter to up to half a stop better on the R6 Mark II over to the R6 Mark I. So now let's come to the final conclusion. Is it really worth it upgrading from the R6 Mark I to the R6 Mark II? I think if the features that Canon just added here, the extra better the switch, which makes it much more easy, the added features internally, also the slow motion features, better autofocus and all that really make it great. And also you don't have any recording limit anymore, so you don't have that artificial 30-minute recording limit anymore, so that's also great. It really depends on how you use the camera. Comparing to a real cinema camera such as the C70, I personally would always pick the cinema camera for video work, because it's much more easy in that workflow to use a proper cinema camera, also with timecode and everything like that. On a mirrorless body, especially on a photo camera, it's really cumbersome. So when you're looking really for using it for video, I would really go for the C70 or even the R5C. But other than that, the R6 Mark II does make a great job. Now, will I personally upgrade from the R6 Mark I? In my personal situation, I only use the R6 as a C cam, and when I'm using it does a great job. So I don't have the necessity to upgrade. But I would use it as a B cam for interviews and something like that. I think that I can continuously recording in 4K 24 really would come in handy for me. So I might upgrade in the future to the R6, because I think price-wise and everything what you get in the package is great. So yeah, that was my comparison between the R6 Mark II and the R6 Mark I. If you have any further question that you felt like really didn't get too many attention in the review, just hit them down in the comments below and I will answer them as quickly as I can. And personally, I can say I really like the Canon R6 Mark II, and I'm really looking up what I discover in my full review, because I will use it on a job with me to really test it in real world scenarios. So keep an eye out for that. So subscribe, support the channel. Hope you liked this video, and see you in the next one, guys. Cheers.